We acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to elders, past, present and emerging.
Hello! Welcome to another episode of the Bearer of Weird News. As always, I am your host and the suppository of all wisdom, Matt Harvey. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Bearer of Weird News. This podcast is, of course, made possible by a generous grant from losing a seat that you never thought that you'd lose because you'd held it for 77 years. Yes, a brand new sponsor come on board, losing a seat that you never thought you'd lose because you'd held it for 77 years. Have you grown tired of stability? Sick of predictability? Wish your once unlosable political fortress had a bit more Weimar Republic energy? Then try losing a seat you never thought you'd lose because you'd held it for 77 years. This exciting new electoral experience where generations of political dominance are replaced overnight by a bloke holding a Facebook printout and looking a little bit grim. Why settle for gradual political change when you can enjoy panic interviews on Sky News? Shocked coalition MPs saying, we need to listen for the 400th consecutive election in a row. And the thrilling discovery that voters can, and just might, actually tick a different box at the ballot box. With losing a seat that you never thought you'd lose because you'd held it for 77 years, you'll experience all the excitement of complacent democracy mixed with this sinking dread of inevitable racist complacency. Side effects may include confused lobbyists, emergency strategy meetings, regional soul-searching, and hearing the phrase political earthquake used by men who at one point thought that Wi-Fi caused migraines. Losing a seat you never thought you'd lose because you've held it for 77 years. Because eventually, even the safest seat becomes an electric chair. But as thankful as we are for losing a seat you never thought you'd lose because you'd held it for 77 years for their support, this really is only possible due to the generous support of loyal viewers/listeners, depending on your medium of choice, like you, who continue to make all of this possible over at patreon.com/Matt Harvey Stuff. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you, supporters of the bullshit arts. Here, we preserve the artisanal bullshittery of the ancient craft of saying apparently before making something up, stretching one joke well past structural integrity, and speaking with the certainty of a 60-year-old man explaining skibbity. This isn't journalism. It's not analysis. It's the art of bullshitting. Lovingly handcrafted, lightly researched, and released directly to the public. Fast-to-table bullshit. And your support keeps it alive. Because without listeners/viewers like you, this show could be forced to rely on facts, or preparation, or coherent editorial standards. Oi! Who could possibly want that? And of course, none of this would be possible, nor necessary, without my live shows. I'm probably, as this is being edited or uploaded, I am on my way to my latest live shows. During my old show, I got bit by a bunkie once in a couple of new places, to Brighton in the UK for the Brighton Fringe Festival as part of Brighton's own Free Fringe from May 18th until the 21st. Basel, Switzerland for a one-off show at the Beast Comedy Club May 23rd, and then of course to Prague as part of the Prague Fringe Festival, May 25th until May 29th. If you know anybody in those areas, or, not even close to those areas, close enough they could scoot on over on a cheap Ryanair flight while it still exists, then do recommend my shows. Send them my way. I really appreciate anything that you can do to help me out. Until then, my friends, I will be the bearer of weird news. Now, let's get into the headlines. Tony Abbott has declared that he will run for Federal Liberal Party president in a plan to help opposition leader Angus Taylor amid his struggle to fight back against One Nation. They're breaking the glass on their in case of extremist nutter emergency kit and rolling out Tony Abbott, who will guide the Liberal Party in the future, assuring their dwindling voters that they're just as old-fashioned and racist as they have ever been. And you know things have gotten bad when Tony Abbott is looking like a viable option for leadership. He will adorn the party with all his best vote-winning strategies, such as mouthing off behind the back of dictators, but definitely not to their faces, eating raw onions on live TV, freezing in the middle of being interviewed for a report, making yourself the head of things that you definitely shouldn't be, ignoring Indigenous affairs and climate change, wearing budgie smugglers, and blatant racism. In the Godzilla vs. Kong of racist bullshit that is Tony Abbott versus Pauline Hanson, whoever wins, we lose. In a showing of the major differences between America and Canada, Attenborough Bridge Secondary School, the school that was the site of one of Canada's deadliest mass shootings, will be torn down. The British Columbian Premier said to the community that the youth of Attenborough Ridge would never have to return to the building where tragedy struck, promising a safe place for the children to go to school. Had this happened in America, the school would be enshrined and then converted into the NRA school for teaching those kids that if they'd all had guns, then this never would have happened in the first place, and replacing recess with target practice. A lone coyote stunned biologists when they discovered it had paddled its way to Alcatraz Island from nearby Angel Island, roughly 3.2 kilometers away. What's more impressive is that the scientists actually failed to notice the remains of the malfunctioning Acme-branded rocket that the coyote had not only built, but then attempted to use to capture a nearby roadrunner. A 50-year-old martial arts expert and former bare-knuckle fighter from Halifax, West Yorkshire, hauled a 2-ton French police car 131 feet down a residential street using a tow rope attached to his penis. No, don't do that. Honestly, guys, this obsession with trying to make your dick longer is really unhealthy. It's not the size that matters, it's that you haven't permanently damaged it by pulling a truck down a street with it. Not only did he pull a truck with his penis, he did it while lit on fire in front of neighbours for charity. The charity was Prostate Cancer Awareness. Mate, champ, come here. If you want to bring awareness to prostate cancer by dragging a car, then you're going to need to drag that car with your ass cheeks. I think that's the only way that this is going to tie together. This seems more like the kind of act that you do if you're raising awareness for, I don't know, men's mental health, toxic masculinity, or the male loneliness epidemic. Is this really what we need to do in order to communicate with our neighbours? Come on, I mean, it does drag them all out to the street, but at what cost? The man said that despite it hurting his penis, his mind was focused on being on fire, and he just ploughed on. And as we all know, that is the official motto of democracy in the modern world. Premier Jacinta Allen has intervened to overturn an unpopular decision to not host fan events at Federation Square during the upcoming Men's World Cup. When asked why the decision was originally reached, fan behaviour, including the lighting of more than 120 flares or fireworks during one match, was cited. Football fans all over Melbourne fell to the ground, gripping their ankle, claiming that the Arts District had done an illegal slide tackle to the world's favourite game. The decision was overturned because, let's be honest, if they're lighting 120 flares when they get what they want, what do you think they'll do when you try to take it away from them? In the spirit of compromise, fans have promised to only light flares when something actually happens, or when they get bored and run out of chance. A new study suggests that a pint of beer contains a surprisingly meaningful amount of vitamin B6, and that an alcoholic-free version may actually be one of the better options for getting it. People everywhere were heard saying, well, that's interesting, but I'd have to drink a non-alcoholic beer, so fuck that. This is set to be the second most ignored scientific discovery since vaccines in the modern age. The US government has released a batch of 160 previously classified files on alleged UFO sightings and alien life, including a 1947 report of flying discs and a photo of unidentified phenomena taken from the moon's surface during the Apollo 12 lunar mission in 1969. You can read all about the files on the new government website, Will you hurry up and forget about the EpsteinFiles.gov? A woman who was taking a toilet break while on a road trip in the Australian outback ended up getting stuck waist deep in a pit latrine for 3 hours after it collapsed, making it officially the worst case of being deep in shit since the last election result for the Liberal Party. That story again, a woman spent 3 hours trapped in an outback pit toilet, or as Qantas now calls it, economy class. The pit toilet collapse is now being treated as both a safety incident and a metaphor for modern infrastructure. Northern Territory WorkSafe said an investigation is ongoing, but witnesses say the woman remained remarkably calm despite the situation being, technically speaking, a complete shit show. An Indigenous man has avoided jail after pleading guilty to vandalising a culturally significant site in the Alpine National Park. The court heard he wanted to vandalise the site for the aesthetic purpose of having a photo of their graffiti tags with a waterfall running in front of them, despite, and this is absolutely true, you can look this up, the area being dry at the time and the waterfall not flowing. I hear he also attempted to get pictures of his tag in front of the Eiffel Tower, the pyramids, the Grand Canyon, and Olympus Mons. But you geography nerds among us will have noted that none of those things were present at the time. Despite avoiding jail, the court heard the repair bill had not yet been determined, but it would be large. Which is only fair. We can't have people destroying sacred Indigenous sites. That job is reserved for Rio Tinto, BHP and Glencore, and they've been doing an excellent job at it. Well, that's the end of the headlines, my friends. Moving on to the bigger stories now, starting with Attenborough news. David Attenborough. And firstly, don't worry, yes, he is still alive. At least as of the recording of this and the last time that I checked. Sure, that's a lot of caveats, but I mean, to make it clear, if he did die in the interim, I wasn't aware of it right now, in this moment, so I couldn't possibly have scrapped this story. Though, at 100 years old, I better finish this intro fast before he does a Betty White on me and takes what remains of the world's hope with him. Any younger listeners, hope, how to explain hope? Hope was a kind of feeling that we used to have that made us feel that the world wasn't going to completely collapse in our lifetime, and that maybe we could do something about it. It became endangered around the same time that it was inevitable that World War III would start in our lifetimes, and then became extinct when David Attenborough died because he made documentaries about animals, and we liked animals. I mean, not enough to stop them from dying out or stop hurting their natural environments or anything like that, but enough to make movies about how that would be sad. Yeah, that feels about right. I guess a further caveat for future generations are animals were a kind of creature that wasn't human and was used often for unpaid labour, companionship and food. How to put this? Food was a kind of way of deriving sustenance that wasn't eating cacti or cannibalizing another human. We outsourced that to the aforementioned animals that we love so very much. But as Attenborough made us feel good about the world and animals every so often, when we discovered a new one, we forced Attenborough out to attend a ceremony where we named that animal after him. Like when this parasitic wasp was named after Sir David Attenborough as a gift for his 100th birthday. 100 is usually known as the water anniversary, despite its traditional gift. It isn't a bucket of water, no, it's actually usually a 10-carat diamond. Ooh. But a diamond is definitely the wrong vibe for old Davey A, I believe. He wouldn't appreciate it. Even if it was a lab-grown diamond, I think he'd still not be into it. So we have had to make do with some alternate options for the discerning 100-year-old biologist, including a platinum mobility scooter with a bumper sticker reading, "My other scooter is an investment property," a custom gold-plated bill organizer, a robotic grandchild programmed to visit it twice a year and explain the Wi-Fi, a framed printout of their first home price next to the current value, purely to watch younger relatives disassociate in real time. You did it! The new wasp that was named after Attenborough, remember that's what this story was all about, the new wasp is named Attenborough nucleus tau. Tau being the Greek word for the letter T, referring to two T shapes on the wasp's abdomen. And somehow, we didn't name this bug after Mr. T. Ooh, I pity the fool who doesn't name a T-decorated wasp after he. It's a whole thing. You'd have to look it up. And look, old Ats, Attenator, the Atomizer, at this point he has more than 50 species of plants, animals, and microorganisms and ancient life forms named after him, including 5 other wasps. 5! That's 6 different types of wasp! You can only name so many wasps after a man before he's gonna want to take himself out of the picture. At a certain point, it must just start to seem like an insult. I am called red-headed celebrities all of the time. Doesn't matter what they look like, who they are, when they're in the zeitgeist, that's who I get compared to. And at a certain point, you do start to think that this is all people think of when they start to think of me. Now, for me it's red-headed celebrities. For Attenborough, apparently it's wasps. Attenborough lived a rich life, including being the head programmer of the BBC responsible for putting Monty Python on the air. So, let's be honest, he is responsible for what John Cleese has become, kind of, but Cleese has to be responsible for his own mistakes, like humanity with nature, you see? Continuously naming animals after Attenborough won't absolve us of our crimes against nature, okay? It just, if anything, highlights the problem. He was informed early about this waspy present and sent letters of thanks to the study's authors, making him like the queen of biology, and presumably the king at this point will also be doing the letters, I don't know. Getting an assistant to send you a copy and paste letter if you live to be a 100, and then write them in advance and ask nicely. Here's the rub. The parasitic wasps come from a family of insects known as Ichneumon, or otherwise known as Darwin's wasps. They're almost all parasitoid and eat their hosts alive. Is this what we think of Attenborough? Guys, I think we can do better than this. Are we calling Attenborough a parasite living off his host, in this case presumably the BBC? That sounds less like a present and more like a string of insults from the Daily Telegraph. Look, we all want to meet him, I get it. But the man's 100 and has spent his lifetime trying to save the world with films about its natural beauty in increasing levels of high definition, while being ignored in increasing levels of high definition by everyone except scientists and stoners, the two groups that nobody listens to. You want to keep rolling him out every time there's a new species of bug discovered? The man has done his time. He has earned a break. Of course he will be honoured and he'll go ahead and he'll say nice things and you'll feel good. But come on, the man did an entire documentary about the majesty and beauty of the unquestionably Cthulhu-like horrors of the deep sea. He knows how to be graceful. He is polite to every creature on earth. So let's be polite to him. Do him a courtesy and let him retire in peace. Find a new person to name your bugs after. Any more parasitic bugs can be named after another prominent 90-something-year-old, Rupert Murdoch. Now there is a parasite that devours its host. Moving on now, it is tobacco news. The tobacco industry has had a lot of clashes with Australia. We were even the first country in the world to introduce the vomit-inducing world's ugliest colour, plain packaging. and then forced them to put pictures of cancerous organs, diseased lungs, and a foot that, while it would rate 1 star on WikiFeet, would probably still be somebody's cup of feet. All that is to say, we have fucked with them a lot. More than any other industry outside of slaughtering indigenous people. That was a huge industry for a while. That's not to say that we don't still do that last one, but it happens more in secret now than it used to. And it's mostly restricted to the cops. So it was a little bit of a surprise when we learned that the coalition went ahead and secretly gave big tobacco lobbyists a private platform in Parliament. Turns out they've been the party for slowly killing Australians through preventable death this whole time. Now let me be clear, I am not surprised the coalition would do something like this. But I was pretty certain we, as a country, had agreed cigarettes bad. For context, a Senate committee considering the illegal tobacco trade in Australia heard closed session evidence from representatives from Philip Morris, the most profitable publicly traded tobacco company in the world. What exactly did you think they were going to say that you couldn't already have guessed in advance? Or did you think you just needed an upgrade to the latest talking points from the cigarette companies? Is this like touching base with Mephistopheles so that you can have a minute to get used to the taste of these new talking points in your mouth before saying them as your own thoughts, you know? It's like a tongue twister. You need to get used to the mouthfeel before it sounds natural coming off your tongue. You don't just roll up one day and exclaim that she sat on the balcony, inexplicably mimicking him hiccuping and amicably welcoming him in. No! You need to practice that shit, so it sounds like something that you've always said and you've always known. Remember the first time that you heard someone try to say LGBTQIA+? You remember that? No matter how much of an ally they were, they fucked it up at some point, and at least one letter got dropped. That doesn't mean that they didn't support all of the Rainbow Coalition, it's just they had to get used to saying it. It's been more than 15 years since tobacco has been allowed to speak in any such hearing. They instead had to sit outside Parliament and smoke cigarettes with the cool idiots, or try to push vapes on children, or just for shits and giggles, really. So what did Big Tobacco say? Was it just, hey, stop it! We want to make more money and this isn't helping? Or was it something with a little more substance? He asked, as if he didn't write the script in advance and then rehearsed it so that it would sound seamless when coming off his tongue, as seamless as saying, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled porcupines. Guardian Australia revealed the evidence delivered by Philip Morris representative, 3 turds dressed in a trench coat pretending to be a reasonable human in their private, in-camera session. These include dire warnings about the rise of illegal and unregulated tobacco products and the risk that some multinational manufacturers could exit the Australian market due to declining legal sales. And honestly, you can fuck right off. We're happy for you to go. Do you think that we'll be sad if you leave? Oh no! Big Tobacco's gonna stop killing us! Take your bat and your death sticks and get the fuck out. Health Minister Mark Butler reminded the committee of Australia's obligations under a World Health Organization agreement on tobacco control, which requires public officials to protect health policy from interference from the tobacco industry and associated interests. Also, Health Department guidance suggests Australian public officials, including members of Parliament, should only interact with executives and lobbyists from tobacco manufacturers when and to the extent strictly necessary to effectively regulate smoking. Yeah, it's not like they're the coal and gas lobbyists, or the gaming lobbyists, or alcohol and pharmacy lobbyists, or defense lobbyists. No. We can't just interact with them willy-nilly. Those would be perfectly reasonable. Tobacco, however, bad. I told you, as a country, we've decided tobacco bad. We made a large and very public moral stance, and we are gonna stick with it, especially when it can make the coalition look so bad. Oh, yes. The illegal tobacco market is a growing problem for federal and state governments, as well as law enforcement agencies. It has fueled violence between crime cartels, with businesses being firebombed and a string of violent robberies and organized crime groups, which earned between 4.1 billion and 6.9 billion in profit from the illicit tobacco trade in 2024 to 2025. But you'll notice none of them were invited to give testimony, secret or otherwise. Partly because we know that they would just say, yeah, go ahead and tax them into oblivion, works well for us. But also because, like the tobacco industry, they're criminals who shouldn't have a say on how we control the industry that they operate in. This isn't even the first time this kind of weak source defense from the tobacco industry has happened. The tobacco industry was given similar treatment in February during a New South Wales inquiry into illegal tobacco, and then in Victoria in 2024. Transcripts from the New South Wales inquiry show Philip Morris representatives spoke about returning nicotine markets back into the hands of regulators, not criminals. And let me just say, thank you, Big Tobacco. Thank you. You know what? Thank you, Big Tobacco. It's been a tough year, and I could really use a good laugh. It's just, you don't think that you're criminals? Oh, that's adorable. Cigarettes are responsible for increasing the top 5 deaths in Australia. You should be guilty of manslaughter at the very least. If not, then chronic, deliberate negligence and weapons-grade arseholery. They then had the audacity to say out loud, so that someone who wasn't in their industry could hear it, the words, "One of the really important objectives of it is to actually arrest the pace of consumer migration to the illicit market, and then actually increase participation in the legal tobacco market once again." I believe their words were, well, if someone's gonna make money from killing Australians, why should it be criminals? It should be us, the legal criminals. Wild. What a wild take. Now, if there is one non-biased voice that we should listen to in the matter of tobacco having unlimited control of the product market, it's tobacco companies. That's right, you got it, tobacco companies. They have no vested interest whatsoever, nor have they hidden the truth about the negative impacts of tobacco since, I don't know, way back in the 1930s. Then paid fake doctors to promote cigarettes. They certainly would never be caught dead doing a thing like that. Nor did they, in 2001, to counter efforts to raise tobacco taxes in the Czech Republic, release a report that touted the, and I am quoting here, positive effects that early mortality due to smoking had on the country's economy. Such positive effects as showing economic analysis concluding that cigarettes weren't a drain on the country's budget, in part because the government saves money on healthcare, pensions and housing when smokers die prematurely. But they're definitely not criminals. They then followed that up by doing the same shtick in Poland, Slovakia, Hungary and Slovenia. Hey, Big Tobacco, come here. Who the fuck do you think you are, you filthy vultures? If you really cared about helping people, reducing the illicit market and keeping money out of the hands of criminals, illegal criminals, not legal criminals like you, show us how much you care by reducing the cost of cigarettes. Eat your own profits in order to save the little people. Consider it an act of good faith that you'd rather lose money than allow people to fall into the hands of gangsters. Sorry, illegal gangsters. The tobacco industry regularly overestimates the illicit tobacco market as a lobbying strategy against tobacco control policies, such as tax increases, arguing that these policies increase illicit tobacco trade and related criminal activity. But a systemic review of the quality of tobacco industry funded data on the illicit tobacco trade identified a fundamental lack of transparency at every stage of the research process, concluding that this data is unreliable. Oh, shock horror. And you can read all about that study in the latest issue of Yeah No Shit magazine. I think the standards for their arguments have lowered a bit. I mean, at least back in the day they had the decency and enough respect for the public to get a fake doctor. These days, the best that they have is better the money comes to us than goes to criminals, right? Right? Huh? At least you don't have to waste police resources chasing us. We kill those same people, but we do it legally. Here is an argument that you might make that could get people on board. The housing market. Boomers have hoarded all the wealth and the housing and refuse to let it go. So we let boomers keep smoking. In fact, maybe we make smoking and fatty burgers mandatory for everybody over 70. Sure, we're all going to miss Grandma when she's gone, but we'll miss her in a fully paid off home that we can't be evicted from. They tried to do a lot of these same arguments back when we forced them to do plain packaging as well. They tried to convince Australia it'd lead to an influx of illegal cigarettes because plain packaging would be too easy to copy. However, independent studies have shown not only is that not true, plain packaging may have helped reduce its consumption. Whoopsie, our bad, we did something really good. Now, this is partly because being such a disgusting colour, it made people want to vomit in their mouth just by looking at it rather than try and replicate it. But hey, these get results. In fact, and this is true, research suggests that increases in illegal tobacco, when they do occur, are more closely tied to changes in tax excise, so those that lead to higher prices. So the illicit tobacco market is populated by consumers whose main concern is price. Its consumption is most common among people on low incomes, people with nicotine addiction who are unable or unwilling to pay the high price of tobacco in the legal market, and then turn to buying illicit tobacco rather than quitting smoking. So we need a better strategy for helping people. In April, the UK passed landmark laws that aim to create a smoke-free generation. And this isn't smoke-free in the way that Philip Morris claims they want to unsmoke the world, but instead of giving people cigarettes, they just put them onto vapes. No, this is actually something meaningful. This means anyone born on or after January 1st, 2009 can never legally be sold tobacco products. Which is kind of exciting. It's kind of like how they destroyed the housing market so that anyone born under a certain year will actually never be able to buy a house. But they're doing it for good instead of evil this time. It's perfect, really. At this point, those kids are 17. That generation is just devoid enough from the idea of buying and owning anything physical rather than having to rent everything, so they won't actually carry a nostalgia for possessions like the rest of us do. So they won't miss not having cigarettes as well. It's perfect, really. Sure, we won't be able to do much for ourselves, but we can look after future generations in the way that we refuse to with climate change. Compare this to what happened on May 4th at a Senate inquiry into the illegal tobacco crisis in Australia. Tobacco giant Philip Morris Limited was not only invited to give evidence, but was permitted to do so behind closed doors without public scrutiny. Well, fuck me! We invented a record-breaking restrictions on tobacco, and now we are being left behind by the UK. Disgraceful. We should never have fallen behind the UK on anything. Australia is not yet willing to go into the banning of cigarettes camp, despite, as mentioned, being the first to turn down this road. Modern Australia doesn't restrict things that are bad for people. We lean in. Coal is just cigarettes for the environment. You burn it up so that you feel good, and then everyone else just has to deal with the impact of your secondhand smoke. Well, looks like we've come to the end of the episode. It's a nice quick one this week because, as I said, I do have to take off. I've got shows over in Europe. If I make it, the world is a mess. Thank you for hanging around. I hope you've enjoyed what I put together here today. And if you do so, please tell a friend, tell two, share it around, like, subscribe, do all those things. Feel free to join me on the Patreon if you haven't already. I do appreciate all of the support that we get from the Patreon. And do look after yourselves out there. If you get the chance, do come and see one of my live shows. I'd really appreciate that. I'll be bringing jokes about the time I got detained in America back later in the year. Looking like Sydney Fringe and Melbourne Fringe, but we don't know yet. Nothing's locked in at this point. So we'll see how we go. Thank you. This has been a rambling ending, and I apologise for that. But until then, thank you. Goodbye.